Good afternoon, everybody. I'm your host, Crystal, and this is another edition of the 9 o'clock Meltdown podcast via speakerphone because once again, Skype didn't work. I've got Emily and Kelly, and they are the creators of, let's see if I can pronounce this and not butcher it. Hang on, let me bring it up here. Whining?
Whining about Herstory.
Good
There is
Lord.
actually a really frustrating story behind us naming our podcast. So the name came really quickly, no problem. But for the first month of us getting the podcast set up, I was spelling whining, WINEING, because I was like, whining isn't a word. I can spell it however I want.
Well, that's how I was spelling it too. Like everything we did was
with an E. And then I realized whining and dining is a thing. Whining is a word, and it doesn't have an E. So we had to redo our website, redo our email, redo our social media because we had everything set up. And I'm like, I'm an English major. I shouldn't have made this mistake. But then everybody afterward was like, oh, doesn't it have an E? And we're like, no.
Well, doesn't whining have an H? W-H?
Well, we're talking, on our podcast, we say we pair fine wine with fine ladies. So
Okay.
we wine and whine about women's history.
Mm-hmm.
Or there are other small catchphrases. History's never been so tipsy. Yeah.
Yes. I was reading that as your front cover piece on the Facebook page. And actually, that's almost what I read, too, as the name of your podcast. That, however, is not the case. And Crystal made a fumble in the first 12 seconds. That's okay.
That's okay. So.
That's all right. Everybody makes a fumble. You have no idea how many fumbles I've made live on air. Oh, man. Anyway, so Emily, just to kind of give people a little backstory into you guys and kind of our history, we are ladies. All three of us are ladies, yes. And Emily, you and I met. So you were going to the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, was it?
River Falls.
River Falls, okay. And I was going to University of Wisconsin Superior. And we happened to meet, you were studying abroad in Scotland, and I did basically a 2-week vacation in Scotland to study theater. So that is how we met. We stayed in Dalkeith Palace together, which is on the outskirts of Edinburgh, for those of you who don't know. And I must say, you and I clicked pretty well. We both kind of had that more avant-garde approach to life. So that's the backstory between you and I, and this is my first meeting with Kelly. Hello.
Hello.
So, Kelly, how did you and Emily meet?
We actually met our freshman year in college. We lived on the same floor in our dorms.
Okay.
Emily always likes to say I look like a badass, and she didn't think we would be friends.
I thought Kelly was way too cool to be friends with me because she had this fiery red hair and kind of this goth punk aesthetic and this really on point eyeliner, and I was like, this chick does not have fucking time for me.
But I think just over the course of hall meetings and stuff like that, we kind of got to know each other, and yeah, it's kind of the similar. We both have similar personalities and are into the same things, so.
Mm-hmm.
It was easy to click, and we did fall out of touch. I think about the time, she went to Scotland when she moved out of the dorms and stuff, and I kind of went my own way. But then we ended up reuniting and actually living together our senior year of college.
Oh, okay.
We both ended up moving to Rochester, and then we lived together again for a year. 2 years.
Yeah, about 2 years. And she said she moved to Rochester for her husband, but I know it was for me.
Wonderful. So, Emily, I didn't know that you got into podcasting. To kind of jump right into it, and then we'll circle back about the different shows that you do and things like that. So I didn't know that you got into podcasting. It came about, I think you had sent me an invite on Facebook to one of your pages or a blog that you had written, something along those lines. And I just remember thinking to myself, whoa, well, if Emily can do it, so can I. And that really sparked taking that step forward and taking that leap out of my, Wisconsin Public Radio studio comfort zone and saying, I can do this in my living room with the same quality that I've always had. So thank you so much for setting that spark in me, because uh, going back probably about, let's say about 6 years, I tried to start podcasting. Well, at the time, SoundCloud was still fairly new, and the other platforms like Bandcamp and things like that hadn't really come into their own yet. And I was trying to launch my podcast off of my SoundCloud account. And for whatever reason, it wouldn't let me. It was a headache. It needed all these, backdoor website things that I didn't own, and basically give us lots of money, and then you can put up a podcast.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward 6 years. Holy cow, was it easy to do? So thank you so much for putting that little feather in my hat, and in a way, getting my ass in gear.
I think it's so funny that you say that, because first of all, thank you. I got all the little warm fuzzies, and that'll sustain the next month. I've been listening to podcasts for a while, and my favorite ones were just people having a conversation about a topic I was interested in. A lot of true crime stuff, and then a friend who I met in college started her own podcast. I was like, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And I never even think about it. So it's just this like chain reaction of women podcasters, and I love it.
Yes, definitely. And it's kind of empowering in a way when you think about it. And I know you and I have spoken off and on about podcasts and, getting listeners and getting people to pay attention, because, and I have asked multiple artists this question throughout the years, and, how do you feel? Do you feel that the internet, the record stores, all these places are oversaturated with music now that everybody can do it in their basement? Or do you feel it's opened up these doors to all these other worlds and all these other things that people may not know about or may not want to know about, but they look at it anyway? What is your stance?
Well, and I mean, I think, say you have just a single door and there's only a small stream of people who can walk through it, you're going to be very limited in the kind of content you can consume. I mean, it's going to be easier to find because there's less, but then when you kind of open the floodgates and everyone has the opportunity, yeah, there's going to be a lot more content, but then there's more opportunity for stuff that's more unique, more niche, and even, here's the thing, even if you don't become rich and famous off your podcast, just having that opportunity to be creative, or, your podcast, your music, whatever you're doing, having the opportunity to express yourself is wonderful. And people really have more power than ever. Like, I have friends who have self-published their own books on Amazon. And, they do podcasts, they have Etsy shops, they sell their art, and it's easier than ever to empower your own art. You don't need someone else to see the value in it.
Yeah, Emily said that a lot more eloquently than I probably ever do. But I agree that it's, it gives people a chance to find what they want. Then you're not stuck listening to the same mainstream crap that, whether you think it's crap or not, I guess, but, you're not stuck in whatever little box people want to put you in, you can go and find what you want to listen to and or on some, cases, what you want to create. And people who feel the same way as you do will find you.
Right.
And then I feel like it changes what we view as mainstream and what we view as popular, because, I mean, if you look at, like, superhero movies, one female superhero movie fails, and it's like, we can't do female superhero movies. But we're going to keep churning out the failing male-focused superhero movies.
So then they do a different female superhero, and it does really well.
But to get to that point is so hard. Yeah. But if niche female superheroes and, like, lesbian female superheroes and all that stuff, I talk with my hands.
I thought I saw something like shiny in the... Oh, so I had a shiny moment.
I was distracted. Bigger producers of content realize, hey, this is something people are into, and then it kind of becomes part of the mainstream.
Right. Like, that's why I think crowdfunding's been such a huge thing. Like, there's so many TV shows or movies or
videos
that companies didn't necessarily want to take a chance on, because they're like, I don't know if you actually have enough people interested in this, but then they can we crowdfund the money, and then finally the studios are like, oh, I guess people do want to see this.
Yeah. And as a consumer, you're able to put your support behind things that you want.
Yeah. And you have more of a voice than you used to.
And that's
right.
things that you don't like.
Yeah.
Like toxic bullshit.
So what you guys are getting at is, crowdfunding, and I mean, we could name all the millions of crowdfunding things out there, like Kickstarter and Patreon and GoFundMe, just to name a few. But what you guys are really getting at is that people can really now put their voice to what they want to see rather than waiting to consume it from, the bigger companies, like MGM, that doesn't exist anymore, but I'm taking a step back, Universal, take your pick of whatever movie studio you want, and they put out things. There's now, a lot more independent. I also think there's a lot more to sift through, because I don't know about you guys, but I'll scroll on Netflix for a half hour before I find something.
Oh, yeah. Unless you know exactly what you want.
Right, right.
You're like, I'm going to continue watching what I've already been watching. But yeah, like, when you're like, I don't know what I want to watch, it can take a little while.
I remember I was looking to, kill an hour one time, and I was like, well, I'll watch, an engaging documentary on Netflix. And I spent that hour looking for, the perfect documentary, and I never actually picked one.
Yeah, I have actually recently discovered YouTube documentaries. So the BBC has been putting their documentaries out on YouTube for people to watch, and that's kind of what I've been doing. Like Dan Jones, who's amazing, Tony Robinson is really good too, just to name a few, and that's kind of what I hit when I'm looking for something to watch. Don't worry, Netflix, I haven't abandoned you. It's okay. In case some Netflixer is listening. But to kind of get back to what you guys were saying here, to steer us back on track, we had talked about, the crowdfunding platform and things like that, the power of a community, the power of asking, and honestly, I mean, if you really want to dig down deep, the power of women. I guess, what is the overarching opinion on that one, ladies?
That I think is so cool about it, and you kind of mentioned, especially for female artists, there are so many unique stories to be told. There are so many unique pieces of art to be created. And unfortunately, a lot of those stories, if they don't fit a specific mold, they're not going to be produced. And so the fact that something like Patreon or Kickstarter can support these, I don't even want to say fringe, but not considered mainstream story from people who have different identities than white, cis, hetero male. I think that's amazing. There was this one that I saw where this guy, he was trying to produce an animation about, so he's a black man, and he's trying to produce an animation about learning to style his little girl's hair. She's got natural hair, and I'm a white woman. I don't know anything about the struggles of dealing with natural hair. But so many people do, and that's not a story I've ever thought of or seen because it's never been presented to me, and it's not something I deal with in my life. And that's not something that anything mainstream would pick up because they don't feel that there's a demand or a value in it.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. And then I don't know, I like that aspect of crowdfunding, but then there's a guy that made $10,000 to make potato salad.
Oh my God, the potato salad guy.
Oh God.
And that was more, a comedy thing because he's like, I can't send you potatoes. This was literally a guy who had never made potato salad. That's just I'm going to make potato salad. And he had only put it at $100 or $200, as a joke. And he got $2,000.
See, I thought, and I never read the story, I thought he set it at $10 for literally the ingredients. And
that might have been it, but it was, people just thought it was hilarious. And I'm like, that is the weirdest thing. But it's it's one of those things that it's I guess it's kind of nice to have a platform where people can just be like, you know what, fuck yeah, I'm going to sponsor potato salad.
Yeah. But the kicker on that one is Kickstarter made him refund all the money.
Yep, because they're you're not giving anyone anything, and that's kind of the thing.
Right, right.
But it was funny.
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, that's what you gotta say, is just, okay. But anyway, ladies, so my whole entire point is because you guys talk about women in history. And now on your Facebook page, you get together, you open a bottle of cheap wine, and you go for it. Let's dive into this podcast. I mean, one, we already went into, Emily, you got the spark from a friend of yours that kind of started podcasting. You and Kelly have been friends for a long time. So what brought about this new facade, basically, wine and women?
The first woman who kind of sparked this interest in us was Olympe de Gouges.
And it was in both of us, because we both saw the same article on Facebook about her, about how France basically erased this woman from history.
And she was this incredible badass. So her whole thing is that during the French Revolution, she was very critical of the monarchy, but also very critical of the revolutionaries who were just kind of beheading people left and right. She's like, hey, I agree the monarchy is fucking everything up, but maybe just murdering everyone you don't like isn't the solution.
She was basically like, guys, let's have a conversation instead of cutting everyone's head off.
And she was advocating for women's rights, the rights of slaves, and equal rights across the board. And she was such a fascinating figure. And it was funny because I was talking with Kelly. I was like, oh my God, you won't believe the thing I heard about. And I start talking about it. She goes,
I read the same thing.
And I'd been really interested in doing a women's history podcast. And one of the great podcasting is if you do it with a friend, it's a great way to stay connected and just kind of build that bond. And Kelly and I have always been really close, but as both of our lives get busier and busier, it's harder to make that time. And so we figured that this was a really good way to do it. And both of us also really enjoy wine, and we thought maybe it would be a little easier to find on the shelf.
So do you guys pair the wine with what you're talking about? So, if you're talking about French ladies, you go get a French wine. If you're talking about some Russian women, maybe a splash of vodka.
Ooh, that'd be a good idea.
That'd be smart, but we're not that because we don't. So I pick a woman, and Kelly picks a woman, and we don't know who the other person is doing, and then we swap off the weeks that we buy the wine. And sometimes we'll, hey, I bought 2 bottles. Do you have a preference? And well, this wine is kind of more connected to my I can draw a loose connection. We just actually our latest episode is going to drop on Monday, and we're kicking off our Pride Month.
Okay.
Series where we're covering LGBTQ plus women. We decided to drink Matchbook wine because the 2 ladies that we cover were part of the Stonewall Uprising. We're like, oh yeah, Matchbook.
This legit matches, and I had bought that at Costco, and I tend to go to Costco and buy my wine, I buy 3 or 4 bottles at a time. Different wines. Yeah, in a while, and we hadn't drank it yet, and then I saw it sitting on my shelf, and I was like, this would be perfect for this episode.
Yep. And I usually pick my bottles of wine based on the label or the name. If it's pretty or has something to do with something feminine, we've done Lake Girl, we've done Kung Fu Girl, Sweet Bitch, I think was one of our first ones that we did.
Nice. So how do you ladies pick out the women that you're going to talk about? I mean, Emily, I know, when we had met in Scotland, you were very well versed in history already. Kelly, do you have a big history background? Are you a history buff? Where does this information come from? I know, I'm going to answer the question myself here, Google, but
Google.
Yes, besides Google.
I mean, yeah, I've always been really interested in history, especially about, like I said, that first article we both read separately, just kind of when people, erase other people for, I feel, is absolutely no reason. Learning, about, lost people, that's always kind of been, a hobby of mine, where if I'm reading, about something else, and they're like, oh, and this person, and I'm like, I have no idea who that person is, let me click this link and go to their page. But, for me, it's never been particularly, women's history, it's just whatever interests me at the time, but women and people of color and, all those minorities have suffered throughout time, and so it's nice and empowering in this generation to be able to pull those people back up and be like, hey, this struggle's been going on for forever, like.
Right, for a lot longer than our generation and even a couple previous generations before us are talking about. Definitely, I completely understand where you're coming from. I actually just watched a really good documentary with Dan Jones, actually. He is a British historian, and just a riveting documentary about the lost queen. So there was a woman back in the early 15th century, and she was part of that Tudor dynasty. And she ended up being queen by default before Mary, Queen of Scots, or Queen Elizabeth during the Victorian era came about. And she ended up being queen just for 3 days. And then they did some shady back deal things and beheaded her after 3 days of being queen.
Wow, snap!
Yeah. And I wish I could remember her name. What did they call her? They called her Lady Grey or something like that? Queen Grey, maybe?
Sounds familiar. We might have to cover up a podcast now because I've never heard. We might have to do some digging on that
one. Yes, please do. I mean, it was absolutely riveting, and just the things that they did back then. I mean, talk about being corrupt in politics. I mean, holy cow, and like everything. The church is tied to the king, and the king is tied to the land, and just all these things that, nowadays we find baffling, but it was just how it was.
I read about a podcast too, is that there's a lot of like, yes, we're talking about this woman, but hold on, let me like explain this little thing because obviously we're not like this anymore. But at the time,
right,
like, this was the thing,
right? But it's interesting. It's terrifying at the same time.
Well, we're definitely kind of that in between generation that like. A lot of us maybe had computers when we were little, maybe, but we kind of grew up with the dawn of the computer.
Yes.
And the internet and, and then moving into smartphones. So we've seen, like, a huge, like, I remember, like, when I was growing up, it would be like, get off the internet, I need to use the phone. That horrible dial-up.
Oh, God. So, yes.
Yeah,
to
think now we're talking through phones, it's not interrupting anyone else. Yeah. Like,
right.
We've gone through such a huge, our generation's gone through such a huge technology leap, like, but we have to take it in stride kind of thing, because the older generation is kind of like, I don't know that, this. And then it's, insane to think about what the generation after us, like, as our generation has children, it'll be like, they'll be like, what's a corded phone? Like, what is this landline thing you're talking about? We already don't know what VHSs are. Exactly. Like, or cassettes, or, like, it's just an insane, this leap forward. And like you said, where is it going to go?
Right. My
prediction is that in 10,000 years, Skype is still not going to fucking work ever. I still won't be able to get my settings right on Audacity.
The speakerphone will still be king.
Yes.
Yes, Emily, I think that prediction is completely correct. So thank you for allowing me to kind of take that tangent away here. So now you ladies had mentioned that you go through and you pick a woman in history and then you switch. Now, is there a lot of research involved in this? I mean, do you just kind of like whip up the Wikipedia page and go from there? Or are you hitting the library, going through some books? I mean, what does that look like to prepare yourself for these podcasts?
I'm sure we do it slightly differently.
I was going to say, I don't really know Kelly's process, so I'll let her explain hers, and then I'll explain mine.
For me, a lot of times I do start with the Wikipedia page. Not necessarily to get, like, the information off of it, but just to kind of get the general, like, timeline almost of, okay, this is when they died, like, that style of thing. And then plus, a lot of times if you scroll all the way to the bottom of Wikipedia, like, they usually generally have some decent references. So then I'll kind of pick and choose from there of, like, okay, this one sounds a little more, like, scholarly, and, this one sounds a little bit more funny, or, I've just learned there's certain, like, web pages now that, like, cover certain things, or, like, if I know the woman's British, I know I can go to the, like, what is it, the Lexica Britannia or whatever. Britannica. Yeah. And I know that'll have stuff. Otherwise, the website I've been utilizing a lot lately, where he embellishes, but again, it's good to get a sense of what her story is rejectedprincesses.com.
Okay.
Those are a lot of women I've never heard of. So there have been plenty of times where I, like, read the girl I'm going to do, and then, like, at the bottom it'll have, like, little descriptions of other women, and I'm like, oh, this chick sounds interesting, and I'll click it over, and then I'll have to, like, write down her name as, future episode. Go do more research.
Is there wine involved?
For me, usually
not. No pre-gaming as you're getting ready for it. Okay.
My research style is very similar. I usually start with the Wikipedia page because honestly, a lot of these women, they might have a few short articles that summarize their lives, but Wikipedia tends to go into more detail. And so that just gives me a good idea of the overview. Something interesting I found, though, is because I don't just rely on Wikipedia. I go to other sites and I try to confirm information, and it's always different. She was born in this year. No, she was born in that year. She died in this year. The further back you go, the murkier history becomes, and it's difficult. But something interesting I found is that I'll read 3 separate articles on one woman, and they're almost all identical. Okay. Because there's so little information about this woman.
It's like everyone just copy and paste.
Yeah, or maybe there's, like, one extra detail in an article, and it just goes to show how poorly recorded these women's stories are.
I know, that's very heartbreaking.
Every article says the same 3 things about them.
And the fact that a lot of articles at the end are like, we don't know if this actually happened, but this is what we think happened. Like, that's so sad. But as far as, like, choosing the women, we don't usually have themes. Obviously we're doing Pride Month for June, and then for Halloween we're going to do Notorious Women, which I'm really excited about. Other than that, I mean, sometimes I have women in mind who I really want to cover. Sometimes they find their way to me through, like, the Google Doodle. Like, we covered Hedwig Kohn, who was a German Jewish physicist during World War II, and her story of trying to escape Nazi Germany is the most, like, frustrating thing in the whole world, because it was bullshit. The whole situation was bullshit. But her birthday came up and she was the Google Doodle, and we were just going to give her a quick shout out on the podcast. And I started reading this article about her. I was like, no, this chick needs her own episode. Right. She is a goddess. I was saying, that's happened before too, where we've read, like, little, like, or I've, like, seen a little blurb somewhere, whether it's from, like, Google Doodle or, someone on Instagram mentioning, like, a famous lady, and, like, I read just a little blurb, and I'm like, okay, that sounds super interesting. I'm gonna dive into that.
Yeah, and I mean, if I really can't figure out who I'm gonna do, I'll just Google, like, 10 women from history you've never heard of, and that's actually how I reminded myself about the Night Witches, who we covered, and they were an all-female Russian squadron of pilots who bombed the crap out of the Nazis in World War II, and they flew at night in these, like, tinder boxes of planes, and they were super incredible. And
I'm like, you wouldn't have even got me on one of those things.
Yeah.
Even in a war.
I totally, like, I'd heard about them once, completely forgotten about them. They popped up on this list, and I was like, oh, I need to cover the Night Witches. This is happening. Right?
Very cool, you guys. So how long do your podcasts usually last? I know that you say you're doing them about twice a month. So what kind of format do you guys use? Is it more of a banter? Is it more factual?
So we actually do the podcast once a week.
And we release on Mondays.
We release every Monday, so look out for that. Shameless plug. But
this podcast is about you guys, so it's all good.
But we switch off who goes first because both of us feel a lot of pressure being the one who goes first. So we're trying to share the burden. We have our notes in front of us, and, like, I personally, I write mine kind of as a script, and so I add, like, little sassiness here and there. And then we have conversation. So it's like, say I say something that, this lady lady had to get a permit from the government to wear pants. And Kelly's like, what the fuck? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, right? And that's kind of why we chose not to talk about the women we're doing, is we reaction. And we try to bring that up sometimes, that it's like, no, like, you have to realize the other hosts, this is their first time hearing this. So, like, whatever they're saying is their genuine, like, what the fuck history reaction.
Yeah. Which actually, that is a pretty decent YouTube channel as well. Yeah, yeah. There is a lot of what the hell moments in history, if you really look at it.
That's why we drink the wine. It helps us cope, right?
There you go. All right. Good deal. So next time I want to dive into politics, what you're telling me is I should just bust out a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it helps. You might need something a little stronger.
Okay.
Yeah,
that might need to be vodka or something.
Gin,
yeah.
Then. Okay. All right. And now, Emily, this actually isn't the only podcast that you do. You do another podcast that is called Showtime? Shit Showtime? Yeah, Shit Showtime, with another friend of yours. And actually, this is kind of where the crossover podcasting kind of started. I had seen a post from you about Shit Showtimes, and I wanted to originally kind of get you guys going on it, you and I believe his name is Caleb. And then that just kind of fizzled out, didn't come to fruition, and now I've got the oh so wonderful Kelly here. So thank you so much for coming on. But if we can take a quick little side tangent here and talk about SS, if we may, that'd be great.
Yeah, so that was actually the first podcast I was a part of, and like I said, I'd been wanting to do a podcast with a friend for a while. I was really enjoying listening to them. Making a podcast is also surprisingly accessible.
Mm-hmm.
We use Audacity, and it's a free software. We were using, like, cheap headsets in the beginning. I think our first few episodes I recorded on an old Rock Band mic. So we were really posh, really professional. And my buddy Caleb, I think both of us were looking for to express ourselves creatively.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it'd be a really good thing for us to do. And I had actually suggested doing, like, a weird history podcast. I really like history. It's a ton of fun. But he and I have this tradition of going to movies together. It's a way that we bond. We go to movies all the time. And he's like, well, what if we do a movie podcast? And he came up with the name. It was the first thing that came to his mind. And I was like, yeah, that's
fine. So what do you and Caleb discuss? I mean, are they old school movies? I mean, are we talking something like Mystery Science Theater? Or are we talking like let's say now, Fact Fiend, or, I mean, there are 12 million others that I could talk about, but do you guys kind of lie, or do you hit whatever's in the theater?
If we were smarter people, we probably would have done something a little more niche,
mm-hmm.
but we didn't want to be limited to what we were going to see, because if a new movie comes out that we both really want to see and talk about, we don't want to be like, well, that doesn't fit in with our theme. Mm-hmm. So what we do is, that's the one we do twice a month. We do a new release,
mm-hmm.
and then a movie that's already out on DVD.
Okay.
And that helps us, keep costs down, because movie tickets are really expensive, but then we can still indulge in the new releases.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of hit everything. I mean, this month we're doing Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and Dog.
It's a weird combination.
Exactly. And it's a lot of fun. It's just kind of whatever we feel like. And the whole point is just for us to have a conversation. And so we'll talk about plot holes in the movie,
mm-hmm.
The actors' performances, the cultural impact of a movie. And it's just, talking shit about movies and being goofy
mm-hmm.
and dumb and inappropriate. And it's a ton of fun. And then we actually will read, like, the Rotten Tomatoes ratings at the end and see if we agree or not. And we just started a new segment where Caleb puts up his closet cosplay challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So cosplay is just, you're not making armor out of foam or, anything like that. It's just, hey, I could go to Goodwill and put this costume together. So he picks a character and then challenges people to do that cosplay.
That's cool.
And then I have my female of the film, which is really difficult, because sometimes I'm like, I didn't have one. There were no women in this movie. Sometimes you're like, your Bechdel test is terrible, right? There was one recently. We did the 2014 Godzilla recently to prepare for King of the Monsters.
Yeah.
And I don't have a fierce female because all of the women were nothing characters. I mean, the female monster, she was kind of
badass, right? Awesome. Oh, that sounds like fun. Definitely. So you guys can check out Shit Show Times with Emily and Caleb on their podcast. Comes out twice a month. And now to reiterate, I'm talking with Emily, and Kelly, who do history about women that you may not have heard about, or maybe you have, depending on where you're at with things. And now that sounds like a ton of fun, that you guys just sit and kind of rip on movies and talk about them as well. But now kind of let's swap gears again and get back into these women of history. Now let's jump into how you guys kind of edit your podcast. We jumped into how you guys pick the ladies, pick the wine to go along with things. It sounds like it's a conversation piece, maybe some swearing in there if it's called for. Now, Emily, you had said that you're using Audacity, and kind of sounds like maybe some gamer headsets as well. I know my setup here, I use Vector, which is a Mac kind of recording software, and then I've got a nice little kind of tabletop podcast setup here. What do you guys, ladies, kind of look at for your audio quality, and where did you learn?
So I do all the editing for our Whining About Herstory podcast, and yes. And I try my best. I'm not experienced at all. I actually watched a lot of YouTube videos just to get the basics down. Mm-hmm. Lucky for me, Audacity is pretty intuitive. I'm not particularly technically savvy. Mm-hmm. So, again, if I can do a podcast, if I can do an episode, anyone can freaking do it.
And I just want to say this was not like me shoving it off on her. When we started, she was like, I want to learn to edit, so I'm going to edit our stuff. And I was like, what can I do?
Yeah, no, this was definitely...
Bring the wine.
Yeah, I drink wine and write the blog. I was going to say, Kelly writes the blog for our website, and I'm so thankful for that. But I don't do a ton of heavy editing. I'm sure there's a lot more sophisticated things I could be doing. Mm-hmm. But what I do is I just make sure that everything, the sound is equal throughout the podcast. I go through and I take out a lot of, like, if we have a silence, one of us loses our places in our notes, or we have to sneeze or pause or something like that. I take out a lot of ums.
Yep. So do I. Like,
I can see that.
I'll take that out too.
Like, probably learn the little audio blip of an
Yeah, I try to take out as much of the white noise as possible. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a challenge. So I've upgraded my personal recording stuff. I use a Yeti Nano, and so I get a lot better sound quality. And Kelly has the full blown
Yeti Blue, but that's because I share with someone that does YouTube.
Something that's been frustrating, at least for me, and maybe it's because I'm overthinking it, is sometimes our audio quality does differ from episode to episode because we're recording in a different space and there's more of an echo than I anticipated, and I didn't hear it while we were recording. I was too close to the mic. Kelly's is almost always very consistent, so I can't blame her. It's all on me.
The last episode I sat back a little, so you'll see. Maybe next time you can be like, Kelly, dang it, you finally screwed up.
But first few episodes kind of haunt me because we wanted to have our first episode premiere for International Women's Day, which was, I think, the second Thursday in March.
Okay.
Or something like that. We made it, but we recorded 2 episodes in one day, and we were going to use a different recording software, and we had technology problems.
Didn't we record the first episode separately, and then it was shit, and that's why we did it 2 episodes in one day?
Yeah, so we actually had to scrap our first ever recording because we were trying to use one mic, and we weren't enough to it. It just sounded fucking terrible. And then for our next 2 recordings, again, we were using one mic, and it sounded a lot better, but if you get to our 3rd episode, they sound like we know what we're doing, but have like nightmares about people listening to our first episode and then giving up because of the quality.
The people I know that have listened to it still really like it. We seem to have at least a consistent number of views going forward. Like when we get our like weekly Buzzsprout, how many people listen to your podcast type thing.
Right. And ladies, I was
too many people.
I was completely laughing at you there because I am well too versed in that. Like I had said earlier, I've been doing this for about 11 years in radio stations, outside of radio stations, in coffee shops, out on the street, in my living room, wherever. And I completely understand and I completely sympathize with you. My first ever radio interview sadly lasted about 2 hours because I didn't know what to talk about and I went all over the map. And this guy, bless his heart, his name is David Rogers. You need to check him out on Bandcamp and on iTunes. He's a phenomenal jazz musician. And he sat through it and endured it with me. And embarrassingly, I have that interview somewhere, but I'm never, ever going to dig it out and show people. So when I die, I dare someone to find it and to air it on my behalf so I can laugh from wherever realm I'm at. But no, I completely understand. I can completely sympathize with you ladies. I'd like to say that, maybe all three of us have moved up a little bit in our knowledge and our equipment, and yes, definitely, there is something to be said. I still remember one of the first sound classes I ever took in college. My professor said, you put shit in, you get shit out, because there's no way you can turn shit into gold.
Yep. I think it's interesting, though, that you're talking about your first interview and you, not knowing what to talk about and being all over the place, because talking to you, I'm like, man, she is so good at guiding this conversation.
Right, she's like, oh, this is a tangent, but to get back, I'm like,
yeah,
man.
Letting the tangent go just far enough and then bringing us back. So you've gotten better. I'm just blown away. I'm like, this chick is so professional.
Yeah. We just tangent all the time.
Oh, well, thank you. See, I think tangents is what makes it fun. It helps you learn about the other person a bit more. It kind of eases people into a conversation. Just because I've done a lot of interviews with musicians and artists and, people from all over the world and all different walks of life. And excuse me, as I burp, I'm burping on my podcast right now. But you can read all day long about their lives. Where did you grow up? Where did you learn music? And that's great and that's fine. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk to you about you. I don't want to talk about, the frivolous things. Obviously, there is a time and place for the frivolous things. I have you ladies on talking about your podcast, but, we're also talking about the things that you have fun with. The fact that you go buy 3 bottles of wine and that's totally okay. Or the fact that you'll find women by, dare I say, Googling it. I know.
How dare you?
I know. It's just
much more technical than that.
Well, and now it is. And I dare say it's in the Webster Dictionary.
I think it is.
Yeah. It is. I mean...
Pretty sure, on fleek is in the Webster Dictionary now. But...
What is that?
So it's a slang term that just kind of means, on point.
Yeah,
or
you're looking real good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, this is how old school I am. I use the word dapper.
Ooh, I like that.
See,
yeah.
That needs to come back, though.
I would much rather say dapper than on fleek, which I don't say on fleek. I had to learn that from...
On pleek? With a P?
F-L-E-E-K.
I
actually learned it from my older sister because she has a teenager.
Of course. I was about to say, I'm like, Kelly, do you have a teenager in your life? Now, you guys are doing a podcast for Pride Month next week. What person did you go after? Is it more of a they-them situation? Is it a gay female? Where are you going with it? how did you decide on it, and what's the podcast going to be like? Is it more informative? Is it exciting? Is it still, the wine and the whining? What can we expect?
Well, we're actually going to be doing Pride-related people all month.
Okay.
Our first one's just launching on Monday.
Yep.
And this first one we did kind of bigger names in Pride history.
Okay.
And I think in both of our cases they were trans women.
Mm. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my one for the week after is a bisexual that kind of just picked whatever suited her at the time.
Yeah,
okay, interesting.
And for the second week, so we record a week in advance, and this is why we know what it is, but I covered a lesbian woman of color who dressed as a man, but
didn't identify as one.
Didn't identify as a man.
Uh-huh.
And basically, we're going to be sticking with the same format. So we have the wine, we have the women, and we're just covering LGBTQ plus women. So like Kelly said,
people that identify as women.
Yeah, yeah. So we're not really going to get into the non-binary territory, I don't think.
Maybe a little gender fluid, because the first person I did, remember, she was kind of a little she called herself a half sister and using language that's not around anymore, a transvestite and stuff like that, and she kind of bounced around, so there might be a little gender fluidity, but it's going to be generally people that identify more as women.
Right.
All right. well, I'll have to take a listen to that. So your first one drops Monday, and then you've got different ones throughout the week, or throughout the month.
Throughout the month, yep. I think there's actually going to be 4 full Mondays this month.
Yep. Going to be covering 8 LGBTQ plus women.
Yep.
All right. Excellent. And now, Emily, if we could just touch on kind of the wicked world of podcasting here for a hot second. I had reached out to you after I had learned that you got into podcasting as well. Just kind of asking, how do you get people to pay attention in a world that's swamped with everything imaginable and everything under the sun? And you gave me some great advice. You said, hit the social media side of things, because that's where things are going. They're not necessarily really going to websites first. And I've noticed that myself. I've noticed that change. Even when I, turn to Google to search for something, it'll pop up with Facebook first, then an actual website. So do you ladies feel that social media really helps, kind of spreading the word about the podcasting that you guys are doing? Or is it just another tool to be used?
I would say social media really helps. I mean, we do have a website, but it's small. We're just starting out. It's definitely not showing up on any first page search results on Google. No one's Googling Women's History Podcast and having us show up right now. But social media has been really great. Right now we're only on Facebook and Instagram. We should be on Twitter, but we're bad.
I don't have a personal Twitter account, so I'm I don't know what I would do for a podcast Twitter account.
We're bad millennials and we don't like Twitter.
Well, but in all honesty, though, the millennial generation is really split in two. There isn't just this all-encompassing millennial generation like there is with the baby boomers or, Gen Xers or what have you. The millennials are very split in two. There's the beginning millennials, which we fall into that category. We're a bit older. We really came into our own with the dial-up internet, VHS to DVD to then all of a sudden Blu-ray to the first brick cell phone. And now our cell phones are basically mini handheld computers. Whereas the later millennials grew up with the iPhone being in their hands all the time. They have that. They understand computers far more better than I ever will in my life. Maybe when I'm 80, I'll get there, but by that time, it'll just be a chip in your brain. So, yeah, millennials are definitely split down the middle. And Kelly, to get to your point about Twitter, I was very against Twitter for a long time as well. I felt I didn't have enough to say. Who would want to listen to somebody ramble about something? But then I discovered that, Instagram shoots your photos and little blips over to Twitter. So that's what I do.
No, I have noticed that. That's why I was like, well, maybe we should set up an account. Yeah. Even if it's just literally our Instagram.
And that'll definitely be a next step. Something that we really want to explore more in the future is social media advertising.
Mm-hmm.
It's cost effective. You can select a targeted audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Facebook sometimes gives you like every now and then a $15 credit.
I think when we started, I boosted one of our posts because they were like, "Here's a credit." I was like, "Okay."
So I think especially for Pride Month, we might try to boost our first Pride Month episode because I listened to it and I was pretty happy with how it turned out.
Super depressing.
I mean, you don't
and
talk
about
a
lot of tangents.
You don't talk about women's history, and you especially talk about LGBTQ plus history without it being kind of a downer, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Right.
Social media advertising, that's where everyone is. It's cost effective. Anyone can use it. And so I think that's we have a pretty steady following right now.
Yeah.
It's not, too big.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's steady.
But I know
adding new people.
Yeah, but I know we want to get the word out there more. And it is hard to compete in such a saturated market. When you open the floodgates, it's great, but it's harder to stand out.
Right.
And so you get your shit in front of people.
Yeah.
Wise words. Not to be taken literally. All right, excellent. Well, I'm excited to hear the new podcast that drops Monday and throughout the month, every Monday. Also, if you guys are interested, Emily does another podcast called Shit Showtime, where they review movies, new and old, for entertainment purposes. I would have to say Women in History is a bit more educational, maybe in a more fun manner than anything else. But thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to talk with us this evening and join me in my living room, basically, with my runny nose. I do apologize.
That's okay. I didn't notice. I didn't either.
I know. That's why there's such long pauses in there, because I'm trying to breathe. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Have a good evening.
You too.